Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, and today we are talking about evil geniuses and what the hell is this org doing when it comes to their Valorant team. Evil geniuses, they won VCT Champions 2023. They started off the year as one of the worst teams in the entire VCT, in the entire world, and they fought back and they made it all the way to 2 grand finals. Lost one of them, won the other in Champions, as I just mentioned. It is easily one of the best stories to ever come out of esports in the entire history of the industry. And then the season ends, and obviously teams make roster changes, players' contracts are up, and everything changes basically from year to year. And pretty much everybody was probably thinking that Evil Geniuses was going to make 0 roster changes, because it didn't sound like they really needed to. When you have a team that is this good, that came out of nowhere and had one of the best stories in esports history, you would definitely want to keep that roster together, right? Well, for Evil Geniuses, as an organization, no. They apparently are not really giving their players what they deserve. The current word about it is that the org has lowballed all the players, saying that if they want to stay on the organization, on the team, then they're going to have to take a pay cut. There's a lot of discussion around it, there's a lot of talk, and we're going to talk about it today while combining it with a season debrief of the 2023 season for EG, because I was going to do this video anyway, and I'm doing this video, or this kind of video, for every single team in the VCT. And for EG, I was probably going to talk about, like, hey, they should keep this roster. This roster is amazing. You can maybe make 1 or 2 changes, but I wouldn't make anything too drastic because this team is incredible and should be able to win multiple championships. But now I have to combine the talk and going through all the stats and all the maps and all that stuff, combined with the talk of what the hell is this org doing? Because it is just absolutely baffling to me that they made the decision that they did. And understand that esports is in a downfall right now. No one's really making money in this space. Players do have to take pay cuts. That is true. But I also think it is just insane that this team is the team that is lowballing the players that won them a championship. And a championship came with $1 million. These players earned this organization $1 million. I guess that didn't fully make up for the cost of everything, but Evil Geniuses is just not making the right decisions from a competitive perspective. Maybe from a business perspective, it is what they have to do. We're going to go through what their season was like, and I'm going to make my argument for why these players should absolutely not take a pay cut and get the maximum salary that they can. Because anyone thinking that, oh, these players are just being greedy, they should take the pay cut and stay together, I really want you to put it into perspective, because these players deserve every single last cent that can come to them, because they came into the season where this org clearly did not do a lot of work, or at least not a lot of urgent work, to create this team. One of the main criticisms of Evil Geniuses last offseason was that the fact that they just weren't doing anything. They got accepted into the franchising league after really not making an impact in Valorant at all before the franchise league, having some pretty mediocre teams to go along with that, and then they get accepted into franchising, and it takes them forever to announce their roster. They were pretty much the last team to make roster changes, to sign players, to have tryouts, and they made the roster that they did, and then everyone expected them to be bad. And at the start, it seemed like that was what was happening. They had a 4-5 regular season. They started that season, I believe it was like 0-3. They lost their first 3, and then they slowly climbed their way back up. But it is hard to dig yourself out of a hole. But they eventually did it, and then they got 3rd in Americas. So you go from a team not really seeming like they care all that much, or the org seeming like they not really care all that much. And then as players, you're now the underdog, because now you got to prove that the changes that they did make and the players that they did bring in, that is the right decision. And then they start off rough. There's rumor that the coach is going to be fired. There's rumors that players are going to get dropped, all this stuff. And then they turn it around as soon as Demon 1 comes in, basically, and they win the whole world championship. So why in the hell would these players take a pay cut? In my perspective, they should get the maximum amount of money possible. Unfortunately, esports is not doing very well right now, as previously mentioned. So we're going to go through everything that happened during the 2023 season for this team, and looking at their placements first Their best placement obviously was first at Champions. Winning the World Championship in one of the best grand finals I have ever seen in Valorant so far. It was an incredible match and a very back and forth match between Paper X, but it really just seemed like EG was just not losing anything that day. They were not going to lose that grand final. They just looked locked in. It was generally pretty close aside from one map, but it was a 3-1 win. Paper X, all credit to them, but Evil Geniuses just was not losing. Looking at their other placements, they got second at Masters Tokyo, losing to Fnatic, and I think that's one maybe point of discussion that we haven't really thought about too much is, does Evil Geniuses win another championship if Fnatic makes it to grand final? I really don't know. Fnatic, they weren't as good during Champions as they were in the previous tournament, obviously winning the lock-in tournament as well as Masters Tokyo over Evil Geniuses. But if we were living in a reality where Fnatic did beat Loud during Champions, do we see Fnatic win a third one back to back to back? It's possible, but I don't think that I'm going to take anything away from what Evil Geniuses did, but it is definitely a benefit to them that they didn't have to play Fnatic because Fnatic was a very good team this year. They got third in the Americas. They started off very poorly and then dug their way out of their hole. They had a 4-5 regular season, so even losing their last match of the regular season. So it seemed like things were getting better. But it still seemed like, this team is now performing better, especially Demon 1 looking very good, but they're still not at that elite level. They come to playoffs as the 6th seed, losing to Energy for their last match of the season, and then they beat them in playoffs right away, and then they beat Cloud9 in an absolutely dominant fashion. They lose to Loud, and then they lose to Energy again later in the bracket. But even so, they made it to Tokyo as the 3rd seed, so it seemed like things were definitely looking up for this team, and they had a very unexpected run during those playoffs. And it seemed like, this team has had some new magic recently, and Demon 1 is very good, but it still didn't seem like they were really at the upper echelon of the entire VCT, and then they proved everybody wrong by getting second at Masters Tokyo. At Lock-In, they placed 9th to 16th. They did win one match in Lock-In and ended up playing 4 maps total, but they did lose pretty quickly in that tournament, so it seemed like at that time, everyone who was doubting them was being proven right. Things did change. In terms of championships won by the organization, it's one, and it's what happened this year at Champions 2023. And unfortunately, I don't know if EG's going to win another one because they don't have the same exact team that they have. So we'll see. Maybe they do what they did last year and they take forever to make the roster. It seems like that's what they're doing so far. They haven't made any signings or anything of that nature. But maybe they think that their method of taking forever and then just grabbing bargain bin players and then hoping that they turn into superstars. I guess that's their plan for every year, but it's not going to work every year. This was a very rare case. And as I said, this org lowballed the players. Unlikely any of them return. Boostio most likely is going to a 100 Thieves. I don't think it's confirmed, but that is the current talk as to what's going on with Boostio, so it's very likely that's where he ends up and he will be their new IGL. Maybe some of these players take pay cuts to stay on the org, but I find it very unlikely. And the best way to prove that these players deserve as much money as they possibly can get, let's look at their statistics. Demon 1, absolutely insane player, quite possibly the best player in the entire world. That's what a lot of people are calling him. I'm not going to specifically call him that. I'm not going to say that that's what my opinion is, because I do want to make a top 10 list of top 10 best players in Valorant. So I'm not going to say exactly what I think about that, but I will say he's definitely top 3. In 71 maps, Demon 1 had 1,248 kills, 1,001 deaths, 256 assists for a KD ratio of 1.24. Very, very good numbers right there. An insane KD ratio. Demon 1 was consistently good. He showed up in the big moments. He showed he could play other characters that weren't just Jett. He wasn't just a duelist player, and he was very good at any point or any character that you gave him. His KD ratio at Champions alone was a 1.39. He was the top in that category. He was top 5 in that category for every single event this year. He has 7 less maps from everybody else on his team, yet he leads them in kills. That's all that really needs to be said. He's so above and beyond everybody in Valorant right now. He deserves everything he can get, and he will be signed by a different team. I don't think anything's confirmed yet, but he will get signed, and he should get as much money as he possibly can, and whatever team gets him is going to be very, very lucky. Boostio, the IGL, he had a fantastic season as well. 78 maps played, 1,177 kills, 1,186 deaths, so very little more amount of deaths than kills, so it's not too big of a deal. He did have a KD ratio of 0.99, and he had 364 assists. Boostio was very good throughout the entire season. He was fantastic for them. He was a great IGL. He was a great personality on the team. Clearly, all of his teammates really liked him, and he was a part of the magic that this team had. When he ends up playing on 100 Thieves, I would expect their IGLing to get a lot better than it was last year, because Boostio is one of the best IGLs in the entire world. Calm, he came out of nowhere, right? I didn't really expect a ton from this guy going into Champions, and then he seemed like he was like their second best player. It was insane. Not to say that I thought that Calm was a bad player or anything, but if you look at the stats, he was like around the lowest of the team for a couple events, but then Champions, he just has an insane run. When it comes to ACS, he was last on the team in lock-in, as well as the regular season and playoffs for the Americas League. Last on the team at Tokyo, and then all of a sudden he was number 2 in ACS at Champions. He had an absolutely insane tournament. He was the most clutch player throughout that entire tournament. He had just huge kills, huge moments throughout the entire tournament, and he is one of the main reasons why they ended up winning. And that's what's impressive about this team, is that they're not just carried by Demon One. They're not just carried by really good IGLing. They have everyone playing extremely well. There are no passengers on this team. Calm had 1,087 kills, 1,069 deaths, 581 assists for a KD ratio of 1.01. Very solid numbers right there. So even though he was last in AZS in 3 events out of the 4, he still had very solid numbers when it comes to kills and assists, kills and deaths. Next up, Jogamo. Jogamo was, I would say, consistently their 3rd best player. I would put it Demon 1, Boostio, and then him. In 78 maps, Jogamo had 1,205 kills, 1,210 deaths, 526 assists for a KD ratio of 0.99. He had 5 more deaths than kills, so just under that 1 for the KD ratio, but he's very close. Again, he was very solid for them. I think he was their 3rd best player, sometimes their 2nd best. Very great player. Ethan, in his 2nd stint with this organization, in 78 maps, he had 1,105 kills, 1,089 deaths, 911 assists for a KD ratio of 1.01. That is an insane amount of assists. I double-checked my math on that. That's how much he had throughout the entire year. He was very good at getting assists, apparently. And yeah, looking at all these stats, there's no passengers. There's no one with like really bad numbers. Like Boostio's KD ratio, if it wasn't for the beginning of the season where they weren't playing well at all, that would definitely be over 1. Same with Jogamo as well. There was no player that was like playing bad consistently. They were just a very solid team who just had incredible chemistry together. And I do worry that since these players are splitting up, I highly doubt that we're going to see this entire roster just under a different org. I really don't think that's going to happen. They're going to all be split up. And I do hope that these players continue to prove that they are this good, because they clearly can be. But is the chemistry not going to be there with the new team? Is the coaching not going to be as good? Because they have a really good coach. Potter is an incredible coach, and she proved it throughout the entire year. And I believe that it is the first female coach to win in the VCT, I believe, not counting Game Changers. So very good work from her. I hope that, whatever team she gets to coach next year, if she stays on EG, it ends up, being serviceable, at least, because she deserves a good team. She's an incredible coach, and she's one of the reasons why this team turned around. Looking at their maps, Haven, they played 7 times, 2 wins, 5 losses for that, for a win percentage of 29%. Attack was 44, and defense was 51. Haven was one of the maps that they weren't very good on. They tried to avoid it as much as they could. But even on the maps that they weren't great on, this team did win in the big moments on some of these maps, as I will tell you. Haven was one of them. They did beat Team Liquid in Masters Tokyo in the upper semifinals, 13-9. On Bind, they played it 8 times. They had a 4-4 record on it for a win percentage of 50%. Attack was 49 and defense was 55. Bind at points was a tough map for them, but they were able to push through when it really mattered. They beat Paper X on it in the Grand Finals of Champions, as well as beating Loud in the lower final. Pearl was a better map for them. They played it 12 times. They had a 7-5 record for a win percentage of 58%. Attack was 54 and defense was 51. Split, they played 13 times with a 5-8 record, a win percentage of 38%. Attack was 46 and defense was 51. Split was definitely a tough map for this team. They ended up losing this map 5 times in a row before finally pushing through and beating Paper X on it to take the entire championship. Lotus, they played 9 times with a 5-4 record with a win percentage of 56%. Attack was 58, defense was 50. Ascent was absolutely this team's bread and butter. They played this map 15 times with an 11-4 record. Win percentage was 73%, attack was 57, and defense was 55. They were fantastic on this map. This was one of the maps that they were elite on. Fracture, even better stats. They had played it 13 times, 11-2 record for an 85% win percentage. Attack was 64 and defense was 62. They were fantastic on those 2 maps, and that's what an elite team needs to have for their map pool. You have 2 maps that you're elite on, and then the rest of the maps you have decent records on, and even on the ones that you don't have decent records on that are more, lopsided in terms of the amount of times you've lost, you can still win when it really matters. And some of the stats on these maps that are worse for them were affected by their start of the season not being as good. Icebox, they played a 1-0-1 record, 0% win percentage, obviously. Attack 33, defense 25. We don't have to go through it. Icebox, they barely played it. And yeah, those are their stats for the season. They were an absolutely elite team. These are such good numbers from both a map pool perspective as well as just all of their players. They had elite IGLing, they had elite coaching, they had an insane amount of kills. They had players that were able to really round out the roster and play really good in those important roles in initiating, in smokes, IGLing. Everything was going well for this team. And they deserve every single penny that they can possibly get. And I cannot believe EG is doing what they're doing. I do understand that the economy of esports is not very good right now. But hey, if they were overpaid, if that's your opinion, if they were overpaid this year, then that's EG's fault as well. The market is where the market is, I guess. But to say that you need to take a pay cut after winning an org $1 million, of course, some of that goes to them, but $1 million, there's ways to pay these players in other ways that aren't just salary. So it's crazy to me that this is what they're doing. They could have at least tried harder to keep these players, if it was going to be a pay cut, maybe don't make it like super significant or don't do it to every player. It's bad from a competitive perspective, and it's just bad for Valorant if we keep having these championship level teams end up breaking up at the end of the year because of finances and all this stuff. It's just bad for the competitiveness of the game, because now we'll never know if this team could have been a dynasty. This team very well could have won multiple championships, and here we are, and they're just not going to now because they're not going to exist. They're going to be on different teams. Hopefully, if there's even enough spots in the Americas for these players to occupy. So it's just really unfortunate. I give no credit to the org for their win at this point because of this. I give all the credit to the players and the coaches, and yeah, the org got those players and coaches, but they didn't even seem like they cared that much at all going into the season. So I'm giving them close to no credit for the championship win. All the credit goes to the players: Demon One, Boostio, Calm, Jogamo, Ethan, and of course their coach Potter. EG, yet again, making bad decisions in esports. What's new, really? But, it's just unfortunate. We'll see how this team looks like next year. I don't expect them to win another championship with a completely new team. Maybe they get lucky again. Maybe something similar happens again, but it's very unlikely. We will see what happens. Anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments below about Evil Genius's season and what this org is doing in terms of their roster decisions. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.